I love you, you skinny Hebrew.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Classickat and Review with Rick Greene, who has authored Marketing Mayhem, Selling Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis to Post-War America. And it's coming out pretty soon. We've got it coming out in a few weeks here. And I'm very excited because I helped contribute a little bit to the book. And even if I hadn't contributed, I would still be really excited for it. So here's Rick Greene. Hi there.
Hey, everybody.
And so what, I know you've been a huge Martin and Lewis fan since you were little, but, and we'll get to that in a moment, how you became a fan and everything. But what made you choose this topic in their career, I guess?
Well, I'd written two books earlier that were fiction. I'll call them comic fantasy novels, kind of like The Twilight Zone meets Billy Crystal. And then my third book was a cinema history book, and it was about the actor Henry Brandon, who was in a Laurel and Hardy film. He played Barnaby in Babes in Toyland in 1934, and he played Scar, the villainous Indian of John Wayne's The Searchers, considered the greatest American Western ever made. So I co-authored this book with my friend Bill Casero. We were both friends with Henry Brandon, who was in some Martin and Lewis movies, by the way. And so every time I was with him, I'd ask him Martin and Lewis questions instead of Laurel and Hardy questions, which he loved, because when he would come to the Sons of the Desert meetings, everyone just talked about Laurel and Hardy. So when anyone asked about Jerry Lewis or John Wayne, he loved that. So Bill and I put that book out about 3 years ago, and I was online on Facebook, just kind of musing out loud. Oh, I wonder if I'll ever do a fourth book. If I did, what would it be? Would it be fiction again? I got this Martin and Lewis idea that's been bubbling around. I wonder if it might be that. Well, the publisher of Bear Manor Media, who published Henry Brandon, saw that post, and he private texted me, send me a pitch for Martin and Lewis. I'll approve it. I love those guys. And I'm like, Ben, it's not even a thing. I was just kind of like musing out loud. I don't really even have a hook. He's like, send me something, I'll approve it. So I had to think, well, what's this book about? What's the hook that would be the concept? And then I thought, I've been collecting Martin and Lewis and Jerry Lewis memorabilia since I was 12. I have one sheets, lobby cards, press books, newspaper clippings, just a huge amount of material. Well, my career for the past 40 years has been in the promotional marketing industry. I work for Halo Branded Solutions, the largest promotional products agency in the world. So I kind of tied the two things in together. How were Martin and Lewis marketed in the late 40s and the 50s? How do you sell something that sells itself? Well, I love all the ads in the vintage press books. Now, nowadays, when a movie comes out, there's one ad, the posters, the newspaper, everything, it just looks the same. But back then, there would be 4, 5, 6 completely different approaches to the same movie. And they're all amazing, eye candy, really. And most people have never seen all this advertising. But for a Martin and Lewis fan, you literally drool. It's so compelling and fun and sexy. So I thought, Marketing Mayhem. How did the advertising agencies of Paramount, of NBC, of Capitol Records depict Martin and Lewis on the record albums, on in the advertising, the lobby cards, on magazine covers, and so on, publicity photos, and Marketing Mayhem, what was literally born, fully formed, just from me posting this silly little thinking out loud on Facebook thing, and over a year later, it's done. I literally finished it this morning. Doing the index, that's the last thing you do, and this book is over 700 pages, so there was a lot to index, but I finished this morning and I'm done. I'm going to wait to review final corrections and changes, make sure the index looks good, and then, as you said, we go to press probably in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I just took a look at the first email you sent me, and that was a year ago already, like a year in the making. And you mentioned like your career, and like that's what comes across, and how knowledgeable you are in describing all of this advertisements, all the materials that they use, such as like babushka scarves or tuck tape, and that comes across in your descriptions of them too. I couldn't have made this book because I'm not very descriptive.
Well, it's interesting that we're able to have this conversation, because you are one of very few people who's actually seen and read the book and given me suggestions and found corrections for me to make, whereas most people, well, they wouldn't have even seen it yet. It doesn't exist yet, but you know exactly what it's all about.
Yeah, and I like that you also go into their solo careers too. So after all that, you go into the posters for some of their films as solo artists, and their music, their records, and some of their, I think you had in there like for the telethon, right? Did you have
absolutely. It's all part of the story. The story doesn't end in 1956 when they break up. There's reunions and whatnot, but the last part of the book is called Legacy, and it's about how they continue to influence here in the 21st century. They're both gone now, but this book will capture an era that is long gone, this late 40s, 1950s Mad Men era of advertising. But you're right, it continues as they split. And there is crossover and connectivity for both of them, even though for a long time Jerry held that in and wouldn't even mention the name. Dean was always joking about, with his Rat Pack buddies, making little Jerry comments. But it took Jerry quite a long time to get to that place. And then after Dean dies, for the rest of Jerry's career, which he continued to perform literally until a week or two before he died, he embraced his legacy and just got over all those slights and all those insults of the late 50s, early 60s. He said this and he responded to that, and the gossip columns pick it up. I mean, it's all part of this bigger story, and it's just fascinating to live through it in this book, which, let me show the cover of Marketing Mayhem.
And I think it will definitely show a closer image.
Oh, good.
When it premieres, I'll add it in there. And I do want to mention, like, because some people think that Jerry never said anything positive about Dean and how good he was while they were together. And that's not true. There was an article that said like Dean is an important part of this act, and he's so good, and I wouldn't be where I'm at if he hadn't gotten me here, basically. So
No one knew better than Jerry how critical Dean Martin was to that Martin and Lewis act. And in fact, there's a quote in the book where when they brought the new writers onto the Colgate, Norman Lear and Ed Simmons, Jerry told the producer he said, tell the new writers, we're not a comic and a straight man. Martin and Lewis are two comics. And that's an incredibly perceptive comment, especially, Jerry had quite the healthy ego, but he knew he wasn't the whole show. He needed Dean to rein him in, to point him in another direction, and to react. The thing I love about watching the Colgates are the way both of them react to each other, especially in the earlier shows. They're performing for each other, and you can see Jerry yearning for Dean's approval to make Dean laugh. And when Jerry makes Dean laugh, it just spurs Jerry on to more mayhem, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, people love seeing connection, and that's why people still are attracted to Martin and Lewis as a team today. They love seeing the connection between two people and the joy that they get from being around each other, and that's what you see on the Colgate Comedy Hour, especially, and just in their other interactions on different shows. And I mean, that's why, later on, when they start to break up, you can see that tension between them, and then you just feel heartbreak. So that's why people get so emotionally invested in them still, because it's like
very much so. When Martin and Lewis broke up, America, most of it, they went through the stages of grief. They were angry, they were heartbroken, and finally had to accept it because they just weren't getting back together. But I don't think people felt that way as much like when an Abbott and Costello broke up, which was the same year. Or the Marx Brothers stopped working together, or whatever, because that connection, that love, isn't really there with most other teams. Abbott and Costello were huge in the 1940s. People loved them, but they were a straight man and a comic. They were doing burlesque routines that didn't require an emotional connection. Bud Abbott treated Lou Costello awful for the whole partnership. I mean, not in real life, the characters.
Yeah.
So there was no warmth there. There was no love there at all. They weren't even really friends. Mm-hmm. Abbott was taking advantage of Lou. That's what made it funny. And then Lou would get his revenge and whatnot. But you got to go back to Laurel and Hardy to see the two characters who really cared about each other. That's one of the influences, the primary ones on the Martin and Lewis partnership. And I do analyze this to some degree in the book. It's interesting stuff, how we feel about celebrities and embrace them, and I even mentioned this. It's kind of the conclusion of the book. They become family, and that there's no greater love than we have for our family.
Yeah, for sure. And even Patty, Jerry's wife, would say that Dean, she would refer to Dean as Jerry's other wife.
Well, they spent more time with each other than they did with their wives, I'm sure, but that's showbiz.
And I mean, and like Dean's family, like Dina like still refers to Jerry as her uncle, or and they were Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra would be other ones that she refers to as her uncles too. And like I mean, Jerry, and one of those articles that said that like he helped like babysit them at some point. So I don't know how truthful that is, but like they went on vacations together in the early years, obviously. And I mean, once Dean remarried a little bit, they started not to take those vacations, although Jerry went on Dean's honeymoon. But he likes that was awkward. That must have been awkward and start off Jean's dislike of Jerry. But
it's interesting because the book is about the way they were marketed. So one of the things that the book isn't is about their personal lives. I don't even mention wives and divorces and kids and stuff like that. It's just not about that. If you want to read a biography, there's plenty of those out there. It's a unique look at the public faces of this team, and it's when it is published, it's going to look like a telephone book. I think it's going to be that thick.
Although I mean, some of the articles that were posted as publicity did go into those aspects of their life, and then like the breakup, they were stirring up stuff. So I mean, that is in the book to a degree, with like, does Dean Martin hate Jerry Lewis or something, those types of articles, or the guy literally chastising them both and saying, what are you doing? Why are you breaking up the team?
Yes, there is the biggest chunk of the book is about the movies, the 16 films, and the way they were promoted. And then there's a section on radio and television, a section on live performances with amazing advertising artwork for live shows. But one of the sections is about the comic books and then the magazines that they appeared, not just on the covers, but in thousands of articles to sell the magazines. And so yes, the first half of the career, it's a lot of puff stuff. How did they meet, and what are their favorite foods? Silly stuff. But then when the cracks started to appear and the tension came forth, it changed. And when are they going to break up? And that the press was obsessed with that. And you're right. They to some degree they fueled a lot of that, which it's sad if negativity like that didn't sell magazines and newspapers. They would have written about more positive things, one would think. And who knows if they weren't pointing everything out and trying to get them to respond to the negativity, who knows how much longer they could have lasted.
Yeah, for sure. And some of the stuff they said was like, oh, they don't hang out outside of work, when that wasn't true. So yeah, they did some of the stirring up of trouble for sure. And that's, I mean, fans would feed on that too. Definitely. So you have every film that they did, and how many pages did you dedicate to each film in showcasing the marketing materials?
I'm going to say it's around 15 to 18 pages per film. A few of them a little more coverage, maybe 20 pages. A film like The Caddy, there's a lot more to say and to look at. So between 15 and 20 pages per film. So the images are just packed onto the pages, full page ads, half page ads. I got to lay it out myself, which is not something I've ever done before.
Yeah.
So hopefully it looks good. But I just thought about what I would want to see in a book like this, and if it looked good to me, I presume the Martin and Lewis fan will feel exactly the same way.
Yeah. And we took a sneak peek, a few of us, to just make sure and everything, and we give it the thumbs up. So yeah, like a lot of the images I had never seen before, and I've seen a lot of images, and like so many of the ads, just beautiful ads, and such detail. I feel like it's even more imagination than ads of today, for sure. Because a lot of the ads are mostly just pictures it's just the movie itself. I mean, some of them are a little bit more imaginative, but these ones, they're just going from drawings and the artist imagination on some of them. And
yeah, it's funny, some of the images were created before the film was finished, and so they would have to come up with material that isn't even in the movie to promote the movie. I'm thinking about the Sailor Beware teaser ads with all these silly gags that have nothing to do with anything in the movie, but they were to run for 5 days in newspapers leading up to the film's release. When I got the green light to do the book from the Bear Manor Media, I pulled all my material together, and I saw that I only had 11 of the 16 press books, and I knew this isn't going to work if I'm missing 5 key press books, including the 2 Irma films. I didn't have those. So I started reaching out to the collector community, and I found a guy in the Midwest who has thousands of press books, and he said he thought he had the ones I needed, but they were part of his collection. They weren't for sale. And I basically I had to pay the guy off. How much? What's your price? And I paid a lot. But I got the 5 I needed, both Irma films, the Stooge, Sailor Beware, which is my favorite Martin and Lewis film, and Partners. I had to have those, so I got them. And the full scope of all 16 films, the advertising is fully covered in Marketing Mayhem, thankfully. But boy, I never told my wife how much I paid for those 5 press books, but she wouldn't be happy.
oops. So you're the one who's like buying things on the side. And they're like,
so as an example, this is the press book for 3 Ring Circus, which is freaking
wow.
Gorgeous. And this was their first VistaVision movie. Most press books are this way, but they turned the press book into a VistaVision kind of perspective, because they were promoting that almost as much as the fact that it was in color, and so on. They had released White Christmas, which was the first VistaVision movie, and I think this might have only been the second one.
Wow. And you've got, so you're the man to go to if anybody needs a picture from the press books one of these days.
I do
Well, I'm
have
all,
them all. I
yeah.
have all 16 lobby card sets, which is 8 lobby cards per film. I have every one of those. I have 15 out of 16 one sheets. I'm missing At War with the Army. And just inserts and 6 sheets and 3 sheets. I mean, I've got so much material on them, and solo years too, which at first I struggled with including a lot on solo Dean and solo Jerry, but
Yeah.
it's so important. Those are pretty hefty chapters. I don't just gloss over. There's 4 or 5 ads from the bellboy and a bunch of Matt Helm ads. So it's not just a few pages. They're nice thick sections. And I even toyed with splitting it into 2 books, but
Oh,
I decided not to. It's one story, and I wanted it to be under one cover.
yeah, definitely. That seems about right. So you also have a forward from Eddie Deason. How did you come to contact Eddie?
I knew Eddie casually from meeting him at Hollywood Collectors shows, and I had even given him some rare Martin and Lewis recordings and stuff when I saw him. So I just reached out to him and say, "Hey, I'm writing this book on Martin and Lewis. I'd love for you to write the foreword." And he said, "Oh, I've never done that before. I don't know. Let me think about it." And about 2 hours later, here it is. I mean, he thought about it for like a minute, and then he got excited about it, and he couldn't. I mean, literally, it was a few hours later, the same day. Here it is. And he did a great job. He's an authority on Martin and Lewis. He adores them, even though the one time he met Jerry was not very nice to him. But
Oh,
even
really?
that did not dampen his love for the Martin and Lewis and Jerry Lewis careers.
Wow. You would think, well, I feel like they would have gone along, and that's interesting.
I don't think Jerry liked people who did
Imitate.
his shtick.
How do you
Going
like
back,
Jim Carrey though? So Jim did his.
he did like Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey was a megastar, and
Yeah.
Eddie Deason, was a successful uh, comic supporting actor in a few high profile films, but Carrey, what was you mentioned Carrey in the same breath as Robin Williams and guys like that. So
Yeah.
um, it,
John Ritter definitely did Jerry's shtick on Three's Company.
he
Like,
he did, yeah.
so- and they got
But
along. So
Eddie Deason is specifically
yeah.
doing Jerry Lewis, where
Yeah.
those other guys still have their own
Yeah.
personalities, so to speak.
And I mean, I guess that's why, like Sammy, the whole Sammy Patrol thing, they kind
It
of,
totally goes back to Sammy Petrillo. Absolutely.
but in that case, I mean, they full on made a movie, and they were trying to actually capitalize on Dean and Jerry's fans, and like people still today confuse that movie with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and like
Yeah.
I would have sued too because that was
Oh, absolutely. It's so blatant, and it's actually a pretty terrible movie. I literally spend one page in the book
yeah.
on the Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla, which is a weird title anyways, but uh I don't know if it made much money, but they didn't spend much to make the film, and it's cheesy, cheap, and terrible, and yet it's fascinating to watch these 2 guys try to be Martin and Lewis and fail. I I I enjoy watching that movie just because it's so weird.
I'm gonna have to, I started. I'll have to watch the whole thing, but I started to watch a little bit, and I was like, "Oh God, why?" It's just, and I feel like that when I watch a lot of people trying to be Jerry intentionally, it's just I can't. Most of the time, I can't do it. It has to be someone that's really good at imitating Jerry, or like some Martin Short's pretty good, but like also like impersonators. Tony Lewis is pretty good. But like most people, like it's just a very fine line, like between becoming annoying and like, because and Jerry could walk that line too. Like some people find him annoying, some people find him hilarious. That's just the line of comedy that he's walking, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there.
I agree. I mentioned in the book how most people like or love Dean Martin. They think he's the king of cool, but Jerry Lewis is a very polarizing figure. You either love him or you despise him, and there's just no in between with Jerry. And that's fine. If you despise him, don't buy my book. But if you love Martin and Lewis and enjoy Jerry Lewis, you're gonna love this book. It's 75% images and 25% writing. It's just packed with. Well, I have a few things here. If we can do a little show and tell, I will. I'll give you some idea of some of the images. Here is a pair. Hopefully, it's in focus, of Martin and Lewis cufflinks from the 1950s, die struck, something from the industry I'm in, the promotional products industry. And this is an arcade card that you would have put a penny in the slot and you wouldn't know which star you're going to get. And if you wanted Martin and Lewis, you'd keep putting in the pennies and hope to get your heroes. This is a little magazine, quick magazine, with a very cool color cover from about 1951. And then they were on TV Guide, the national publication, twice. So these are the 2 issues of TV Guide that Martin and Lewis appeared on the cover. And just recently, I picked these up at an antique store. They're notepads with color images of the boys, a smaller one, kind of a 5x7, and then the larger 8x10 size. They were a dime back in the 50s. Here's an example of a magazine cover that they were on. This was an annual publication where they would rank all the best of the radio and the TV stars throughout the 50s and into the 60s, and even the 70s they published that. So Dean and Jerry made the cover. And this is another one I got pretty recently. They were on the cover of 1000 Jokes magazine 4 or 5 times. And next, this is one of the programs when you would go see them live, and you'd pay maybe $1 and get a program in the lobby.
That one I actually have. I'm not sure who. One of them autographed it for both of them, and I think it might have been because it says Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, but it's clearly the same, like, to whoever from Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. I think it's Dean's handwriting because it's not really. It doesn't seem like Jerry's.
That's interesting. These are Christmas ornaments that they sent out one year. Really huge die cut cardboard with little kind of colored holiday festive rope to hang them from your tree.
That's awesome. And you even have it framed, and I want that on my wall.
I won that in an auction of 6 or 8 items, and it came framed, and I left it that way. And here's an example from one of the press books from the My Friend Irma press book. This is drawn by Al Hirschfeld, probably the greatest caricaturist in American art. And he worked for MGM in the 30s, so he drew Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers, and then
the hands on the
Yeah, he
Like,
his lines were very fluid. So the book is filled with rare Hirschfeld drawings from my friend Irma, and then later on he did some solo stuff with them. And this is Michael Haid loaned me this incredible image promoting the Colgate Comedy Hour, a TV guide ad, and also from Michael, which he couldn't use in his book, so I took whatever he would give me. An incredible ad for a live appearance of Martin and Lewis at a Texas state fair.
I wonder if that's the same. Is that this? Well, it might be. Is that from 1952? Is that the same?
I think it was, yes, 1952.
So that's
and
the same one from the not Life magazine. It's the one where they're at the state fair in Texas, and they have the cowboy hats, and Jerry's like in blue plaid, and he has like a little Star of David on his.
That's
A
funny.
little baby one.
That would have been that appearance, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then I have some full page variety ads. This
Look magazine. Look magazine was the one.
Oh, okay. This is from 1955, and they're promoting that they're going to be at the Sands in a few weeks. So it's just filled with stuff like this that hasn't been seen in 60 years, 70 years. And you're the one that got me the Life magazine image that I needed for the book, but here's my actual magazine, and I framed it with both of their autographs that I had on index cards to complete that little portrait.
Yeah, mine still has the label from who it was sent to from the 50s. Here's the one of the scrapbooks from the 50s that I had, and then so this is Martin Lewis. They're going to Michigan. Most of these are from like Minneapolis, from the era, the area that this person was located. And there's like one of these that she actually gives. There's a 1 for 3 1 Circus.
Oh, that's cool.
So she actually wrote of her experience at one of their shows in 1953. This is one, but she did like separate some of these articles. This was one that, so they
like
went
a fan would do.
Yeah, they went bowling.
Very cool. So are these 100% Martin and Lewis, or did she follow other stars?
It was all Dean and Jerry. Yeah.
Wow. So
he's bowling, and Dean and Patty and Jerry all went together, and so it seems like Dean and Jerry and Patty went on a lot of things together. There's some other things. So there's one with Jerry and Gene and Dean and Patty dancing together, and there's just,
what a find.
And there was 8 of these. So there's this one here. This one actually is in Chicago, it looks like. But yeah, so there was 8 of these. And yeah, so this is from Living It Up promotion with Janet Leigh. And let's see. There was, let's see here. What's happening to Jerry? So this is more of like saying, this is like when they were about to break up, but this was like more, I think 1953 or 4. Oh, okay, yeah, this is like 1955. They're like saying stuff that Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis no longer make those riotous home movies with Jerry and Patty. And, they're talking about the feud between Bob Hope and Jerry, apparently. And now it says that Gene and Patty avoid each other socially and all this other stirring up nonsense, and
Fanning the flames of discontent.
Yeah, so I had 8 of these, in addition to all the ones that I bought separately of magazines and articles and stuff. And what is this one? Oh, this is a pretty dramatic one. The Day the Undertaker Called for Me. And apparently some guy that was an undertaker called Jerry's office or something, and I haven't heard this one in a while, but it's, I don't know, this is pretty dramatic. So they have some pretty dramatic articles sometimes, but recently I did find a very good find, an amazing find. There's some Martin and Lewis articles, and this one, it says Jerry Lewis engraved into the thing, if you can see it. It's a whole, look at how thick this thing is.
Wow.
Like, I just bought this for like, I don't know, 30 something dollars, and it has a bunch of, let's see, let's look for a Martin and Lewis page. But it's mostly, I would say this one's mostly about Jerry, but it was about 1955. And there's no, that's not Dean, never mind. So there's, it's hard to prop up, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Let me see if I can. It's a humongous book. Oh my goodness. And all of these, I hadn't, like, I would say like 75% of this book I had not seen before any of these images. So
amazing.
You just keep finding more and more. There's like Dean and Jerry on the set of Partners. I had that one, actually, that image. I'm not sure if I had the article. But yeah, there a lot of this stuff was from like 55, 56, 57. And I was just sitting here so amazed at, these images. Like, this is one with his son down here. And some of them that were just really, really beautiful images. And I was like, this is Christmas. I don't know, but yeah, it was just a whole, you have to be careful to scan it though. I'm kind of, it's kind of delicate at the same time. And so we shall see how I'll scan it for people, because I like to scan images for other fans.
Oh, I'd love to see that material. That's almost another book, is that kind of material.
And some of the photos of Jerry, I was just like, oh, like, it was a beautiful images. And once you think you've seen it all on Dean and Jerry, more pop up. So,
yeah, there's so much out there. I went to the Jerry Lewis auction in 2018 in Las Vegas, and I won a couple of lots of Jerry's own scrapbooks.
Yeah.
He was maniacal about binding every script for everything he did, whether it was a guest on someone else's show or his own shows, his own movies. He created thousands of these scrapbooks, and I own 10 of them. Some radio shows, some TV shows, a rare Colgate episode that they were on, and some of them have some pretty incredible photographs, and I put a few of them in the book.
Oh, I was so excited to see the lost episode of the Colgate Comedy Hour, where they were like they weren't the host, but they were co-host. They were one of the many people on the show. And just, I was like, yes.
Yeah,
That's
that
just
was
so much
called
because
the
these,
Colgate
yeah,
Variety Hour, and it was saluting Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma. So Dean came out and sang Some Enchanted Evening or one of those kind of songs, and then Jerry conducted a medley of Rodgers and Hammerstein, completely straight, and then they both come out and do a little bit of shtick. But yeah, that's one that none of us have seen. It's just not out there, but
yeah.
I have the script and about a dozen photos of Jerry rehearsing with the NBC orchestra, or no, with the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra
Yeah.
on an NBC soundstage. And it's just fascinating to see.
And also, well, like so there was like about, I think, like 2 to 3 photos that we had seen before of Dean and Jerry. There's like the one that's in color, and it was taken by Yul Brynner of all people, randomly. And like Dean is holding Jerry, and Jerry's like an orange sweater or something. And that was a beautiful photo. And then there was like 2 of them on stage, but that's like all we had of that episode. And I think Michael Hayes said it's only available on a 16mm footage that Jerry had taken. So of the rehearsal, maybe. So
Jerry used to get kinescopes of every appearance, and he archived them. He kept them in his warehouse.
yeah, so like I wonder where that one is then. Like if he only has the home movie, you would think he would have the kinescope of that one somewhere.
I'm sure he had it, and I think the Library of Congress has all that stuff now. So they do things slowly over there. So over time, they'll probably scan them in and protect them and so on. But he made sure to get copies of, even if there were on a newsreel or just it's little short footage, he had everything.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say just buy the book alone for those photos of Jerry conducting. I was like really surprised to see that. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Also for promote, I just realized I'm wearing, hold on, I don't know if you can see it. I like it. I bought my friend Kayla made that, so from her Redbubble store. So Martin and Lewis memorabilia and things still continues on, because we make some images sometimes of for fun. So how did you become a fan when you were little?
Well, I was born 2 years after they broke up, so I never saw any of their films first run. I never saw them perform live together. I saw them perform as solo artists, Dean once and Jerry at least 10 times. So when I grew up, I was going to see films like The Disorderly Orderly first run, The Family Jewels. I saw Airport opening weekend and so on, the Matt Helm movies. But watching the telethon as a kid, Labor Day was telethon weekend in my house, and we tried to stay up late, and then we'd fall asleep, and then in the morning you'd start watching it again. It was must-see TV. Those early years, you'd have Sinatra coming on, and John Lennon and huge superstars. So the Labor Day telethon was part of growing up, and in fact, now that it's gone, it's part of the past. I say Labor Day is just another 3-day weekend, but it used to be the Jerry Lewis telethon weekend. So anyways, I grew up loving all that stuff, and when I started collecting things around 1970, 71, I got into the horror movies and the Universal films, and started buying little castle movies, little 8mm abridgments of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and so on. And that led me to Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy, and other home movies that were complete shorts, not just little clips. So when you collect film, then you start collecting posters and one sheets and all the stuff that promotes the film. And back in the 70s, I bought a Dr. No one sheet, the first James Bond film, for $3. And now it's worth
Wow.
thousands of dollars. So I was buying Martin and Lewis stuff for, a buck here and a buck there. That press book I held up for Three Ring Circus, I paid $1 for that. It was in a big stack of $1 press books. Now, this was in the 80s, but still a dollar well spent. So I like that stuff. I didn't watch baseball games or collect baseball cards. I collected movies and press books. And back then, that stuff was inexpensive. It's not anymore. It's my retirement now.
So what? So anybody could buy the press books, right?
Well, no, you still needed to know where to go, where to find them. I used to go to conventions. There was no internet, there was no eBay, so you would go to movie weekends and showcases and collector shows, and you'd go to swap meets and antique stores.
Yeah.
And once in a while, people would have crazy prices on stuff, but most of the time, it was all very reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I don't know if I showed you, there's like this one thing from Walmart of all places that had the image that you do have in the book. It's from That's My Boy. Let me go get it really fast, but it's a Magnavox advertisement that Dean and Jerry, and then it was like Polly Bergen and Marion Marshall had, and it was really random for them to have this at Walmart. Let me get it for a second.
Yeah, they would print those things onto metal tin signs, which isn't how they were originally presented. That was an ad in a magazine, but the Walmart prints them onto tin signs and passes it off as vintage. Well, the ad is vintage, but they made that like 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. It was just really random that they found that one to print, I guess. It was, and my friend sent it to me. I was like, where did you get this? She's like, Walmart. It was just at Walmart. So, it just seemed like a random advertisement for them to use of Dean and Jerry anyway, if they were going to use any, I guess. Anyway, but going back to your experience with Dean and Jerry growing up. So did you see any of those films the second run?
Absolutely. They would put them out as double features in the 60s. So I did see a few of them on the big screen that way, but mainly they were on television. We would, like in the early 70s, I grew up in Cleveland, we would have the weekend movie, and they'd run it 3 times, once on Saturday and twice on Sunday. So if they're running You're Never Too Young 3 times, I watched You're Never Too Young 3 times. You got to know where all the splices were in the print that they ran. I remember in, I'm going to say 1973, I was 14, and Jerry Lewis came to Cleveland and performed at a place called the Front Row, one of those theaters in the round. And it was the first time I ever saw him. It was the first time I really saw any celebrity, and it was him. So my mom had to drive me and my friend there, and she dropped us off, and we went into the theater, and there was Jerry Lewis doing his act and singing and throwing up the cane and telling jokes. And after about an hour, he told a joke, got a laugh, and then he left. And he didn't say good night, everybody. Nothing. He just left. So we all just sat there thinking, oh, he went to take a break, or he's going to come back and do an encore. We didn't know. And I mean, the entire audience, nobody moved. We didn't know the show was over. So after about 10 minutes, he came back and he looked at us like we were idiots. And he said, go home. The show's over. And then he left again. And then we believed him and we went home. But I just thought, how strange. How were we supposed to know it was over? He didn't indicate that to us. And I just thought,
did he even have a band on stage or no?
No, it was a small in the round stage. So the music was, I don't know if it was recorded or if the performers were under the stage or something, but you didn't see, all you saw was the star.
And there was like no music as he walked away, or
not that I recall, no, because he told a joke, he got a laugh. You always leave on a laugh. That's important. But you should at least say, thanks for coming, everybody, or just something.
Yeah, because usually what even? That's maybe they told him, hey, nobody's leaving. Maybe you should say.
I'm sure that's what they did. You have to go back out, Jerry, and tell them to leave.
They're waiting for you.
And I mean, we all felt kind of silly, but what are you going to do? I ended up seeing him many, many more times throughout the rest of his career, and went to see Dean Martin just once. He was in Vegas at the MGM Grand when it was in the middle of the strip, not the newer version, that green one on the end of the strip. And I remember being seated, and I slipped the guy $20. I says, hey, can we get really good seats? He nods. Front row center. He walked us straight down to the front row center. I was looking up at Dean Martin. I could see the scuff marks on his black shoes because they were right in front of me. I couldn't believe it. And it was magic. I saw Dean Martin sing That's Amore live. And of course he messed it up and he made jokes.
Yeah.
He even said, like he always did, you want to hear the song right? Buy the record. But it was amazing. So when that show ended, I was in the front row. I held my hands up like a fangirl, and he walked over and he shook my right hand. Then he shook my left hand. He shook them both. I'm like, oh, that was so cool. I loved it.
And you do mention that in the book too. I think. That's amazing.
That story is in there.
Just the fact that he shook both hands, that's hilarious. I definitely would be like, oh, Dean. The one time I did see Jerry twice, but the second time I thought I was like going up. I wasn't sure where the seat was, and I was like, oh my goodness, if I'm like that close, I'll have a fit. But luckily, yeah, it was at the end of the first row table. It was kind of like a table down center, but I was pretty close. And then I got to talk to Jerry and ask him a question, and that was a great moment, even though he didn't really answer my question. I kind of knew that I asked him, have you ever had a scene in one of your films that you were nervous about, basically, is what I said, or didn't want to film? And I kind of already knew that, Frank Tashlin and other directors had said, hey, like, he always had like issues before dramatic scenes. So he didn't want to film them. He said he saved those scenes for last. So I'm pretty sure he probably, in his Martin and Lewis years, he probably had the same thing where he didn't want to film the dramatic scenes. I'm sure he had a hard time, especially in the Stooge, filming those dramatic scenes with Dean at the end of the film. Sure, he didn't look forward to those. But anyway, Jerry was like, I don't know, or no, I can't recall. It's a good question, but I don't recall. And that's then he told me, I think she was drunker than hell. And I laughed, I cackled as I walked away. And at first, Dean, I just called Jerry Dean. Jerry asked, because he's almost 90 at that point. He couldn't make out and see in the distance, who's talking to him, and he had hearing issues. But he asked, if it was a girl speaking. He's like, "Are you a girl?" And to this day, my mom, who was with me at that point, thinks it was some rude insult. I was like, oh my God. And she likes Jerry, but she thinks that was him insulting me. I was like, stop.
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
It was a joke, but that he had used for, I think it was partially a joke, but or he just couldn't see, but he had used the same joke on Marlene Dietrich 70 years ago or 65 years ago on one of their radio broadcasts. And he had said that joke before to other women who were he had affairs with. So it's a silly.
Hey, if you're in the same category as Marlene Dietrich, you take it.
That's what I said. And she was like, no, he was insulting you. Like, I don't know. Who knows? But I definitely thought it was hilarious anyway. And just
well, I have a few window cards that I pulled off the wall. Why don't I hold these up and see how you like them? There's 3-ring Circus.
I like the ones around the color films get even more colorful with the ads, I think, especially artists and models.
And all 3 of these are color films. And there's just fantastic image from Living It Up.
Is that so? That's Janet Leigh, right? She's in a random costume.
Yeah, just sticking her head out the window. She was a big star at this point, and she definitely let Martin and Lewis take center stage. Mm-hmm. Although she is one of the best of Dean's leading ladies ever. And then there's the Hollywood or Bust, the last of the 16 films. A nice window card, and this is from the the Dream Theater. They would print it on the top of the window card, and then the image was the bottom part.
I have I think it's Partners. I think my friend Alan Goldfarb, I do the round table discussions with, he sent me one of I think it was Partners. I've opened it up, and it was a big, huge theater ad poster, and I really enjoyed that. I'm thinking of buying other ones. I focused, I think, a lot of my memorabilia purchases on articles and magazines, and not so much. It just depends, on what memorabilia. So, if I see a babushka scarf, I'm gonna buy it. Your friend, Joe
Patrici is the one that had that. Yeah,
he said that scarf was a pretty scarf, And the radio ad, I'll have to play it during this special or something in editing. But their ad I found on a cassette tape that my friend sent me, and it was the ad for the babushka scarves, and I was like, what is this? What is this ad? I had no idea about this item, and it was a pretty funny ad. And then I do have the puppet show record, and I think that was all I had. I didn't have I did see the full puppet show though listed. And so one of these days I will get one of the puppet shows. But
yeah, I was bidding on one a few months ago, and when it topped $2,000, I dropped out long before that, but it was a mint in the box, which is very rare.
Maybe
even
that
the
was
puppets.
The same one. That was the same one, I think. Like
probably, yeah. I don't know who got it, but that's a treasure. And I had never heard that record. I'd been dying to hear it. And my friend Joe, who you just mentioned, he has one as well. So he had it digitized and he sent me a CD of it. And both sides are 1 minute, just about 60 odd seconds from radio show broadcasts. So I thought they recorded something specially for the Puppet Theater toy release, but no, it was just a clip from radio shows that the kids could perform as Dean and Jerry mouth, to the puppet, to the radio record.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned, like, in the book that like their interconnection with the songs that they were promoting at the time, or had just released, and they were promoting them on their radio shows. So like especially Jerry's songs that would have probably not otherwise been heard by the masses,
Very true. There was so much cross promotion going on at the time. Hal Wallace would have been thrilled that they, at the end of every episode of the radio show, which was on for 4 years, they would always promote whatever the latest movie release was or coming out was, and they would promote Colgate comedy appearances, and they would ask for muscular dystrophy donations, all on the radio show. Then many of the advertisements for the record releases would promote being performed live for the first time on Colgate Comedy Hour this Sunday. So it's very interesting to see how the movies and the TV shows and the records were all self-promoted, mainly on that radio show. That show was a great vehicle for people who didn't own television sets yet, which was a lot of America in the early 50s, but you could still hear them on the radio, and then of course see them in the movie theaters.
And also they would promote their theater appearances and road appearances. I don't think they did the Sands, but like mostly it was like, hey, we're giving you a list of where we're gonna appear on these dates. Be there.
They after they did the first 3.5 years of their partnership was nothing but nightclubs. But after they started making movies and they had a radio show and they had to do the Colgate, they couldn't do nightclubs as much, but that's when they would do these state fairs. They would do mass, get huge audiences at these state fair appearances, and they did quite a few of those.
I think especially after the Paramount appearance where they had all those fans for like
in New York,
2 weeks or whatever in 1951.
2 weeks, yep.
And I think that really signaled like these guys are huge. I think the Colgate Comedy Hour was definitely the reason why they had all those fans there. I'm not sure if they would have had them prior to the Colgate Comedy Hour. They were still fit. They were still, getting big, but I think that really, the Colgate Comedy Hour is what, escalated their rise to fame. And that's shown at the Paramount right there. And I think that 1951 is, or late 1950 is like the turning point, or I guess if you could say that there's a turning point, but as an escalation point, I guess is
Yes,
what I wanted to
I
say.
agree.
Also, in the book, you do talk about the telethon. I forget if you mentioned if you saw it when it aired, or was that during the middle of the night?
Yes. So I worked the telethon for 5 or 6 years from 1976 to about 1981. So I did a couple years in Cleveland and a few years in San Diego when I moved out to the West Coast, where I would answer phones for the whole 21 hours. It was an incredible experience. But one year, a few years after that, I went to see the telethon in Vegas, and this story isn't in the book. He was at Caesar's Palace that year, so it was the mid '80s. The telethon was still considered big time entertainment and not cheesy. And I knew the rumor was Sammy Davis was opening the telethon, so we went to get in line. And I wanted to get in for the opening. I wanted to see Sammy Davis. I wanted to see the beginning. And we went around one in the afternoon, many hours before it started. And the line was already astronomically long. And I remember saying to my wife at that time, not only are we not getting in for the opening, we'll be lucky to get in by midnight. So I said to her, no matter what I do, just stay with me. She's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, just stay with me. So as soon as the line started moving, I said, Dad, here we are. Dad, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Dad, here we are. I'm sorry, excuse me. Dad, wait a minute. I'm so sorry. And we literally walked through hundreds of people, and I'm doing this. And everybody let me go. And we got into that first group, and I saw Sammy Davis open the telethon. It totally worked.
Dad, wait.
My dad was not there,
yes.
but I was.
That's so funny. Tricky. Somebody
Ricky.
You didn't let somebody see Sammy. I'm just kidding.
You know what? I did not want to miss that opening, and I didn't.
Yeah. Once, and then I was only a few years before he was gone. So.
Yes, exactly.
Was that the 87 telethon, or
it was 86 or 87, right around in there.
Did you ever see them at Bally's? Jerry and Sammy.
I did see Jerry and Sammy once. I saw Damn Yankees. I saw Jerry Lewis Unlimited, the stage show he put together before Damn Yankees. And then I just saw him just as Jerry Lewis another several times. So I probably, and then I went to his talk show. He did 5 pilot episodes of that talk show in the mid '80s. And I saw 2 of those, maybe 3, but definitely 2 of those. So I've seen Jerry live at least 10 times.
That's awesome. I think if I had the opportunity and money, I would have seen him, more than twice. But and it's sad because I became a fan right at the end of the telethon era, and the one year that I tried looking. I remember trying to look for his telethon on TV. I think it was the last one, 2010, and I couldn't find it. I don't know what the deal was. I think, wasn't it a shorter amount of time at that
Oh
point?
yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of tension at the end there, and he was butting heads with the director of MDA, which led to him getting ousted, which of course the public outrage over that was palpable. It was huge. And everyone on Jerry's side, no one interested in what that guy had to say about him being difficult or whatever. It was the Jerry Lewis telethon. It just, that's what the show was. So when they made that change, they were signing their own death warrant. And sure enough, look what happened.
Yeah, and it's kind of ridiculous when they do mention him later on, and they're like in passing, or they don't really mention him. They just, they had like images of him, and then they tried to bring it back this last year, and that was a little silly. It didn't. It was just
it belongs in the past because Jerry Lewis isn't here anymore. So end of story. I still donate to MDA. I have my whole life, but it's not what it was.
Yeah, and I wonder if they even have the same amount of donations anymore or awareness. I mean,
Absolutely
at
not.
some
No.
point, younger people aren't going to be as aware of it, the cause and what they're doing.
Which is sad. I remember the very first telethon I worked, 1976. You know what's coming. I'm sitting there answering phones. Well, actually, we weren't answering phones. It was like 11 o'clock at night. The phones weren't ringing. I'm sitting there, and they had a monitor up in front, two of them, so we could watch the live feed from Vegas. And I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. There's a few hundred of us wishing the phone would ring, and I see Sinatra's up there. Oh, that's a huge star. So glad Jerry got Sinatra. The sound had been turned down.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear him say, I have this friend who likes what you do. Will you send my friend out? But I saw the friend come out, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Dean Martin. I flew out of my seat over people, ran to the front and turned the sound up, and they were still applauding. So I didn't miss a word.
Yeah.
And then I watched the whole thing. I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, it doesn't matter how much money he makes. This is the story.
Yeah.
And international front page news, Martin and Lewis reunite on the telethon. I couldn't believe it because I loved both those guys. I was heartbroken they had broken up, and I wasn't even alive when they were a team. And here they were in front of me, and I'm turning, it's Dean Martin, and nobody really cared. But it was a big moment for me.
Christine and Jerry, they're together again.
They're hugging.
Why don't you care?
Exactly.
This is an important historical moment. Okay. I'm surprised that the one of them later where Jerry surprised Dean at his birthday party didn't, make any headlines really.
It got a little bit. I remember there was a little clip on Entertainment Tonight or something, but yeah, that was the reunion, and the few things that happened after that, you're right, they were just a blip.
Or even the one with like Jerry surprising Dean and Frank at the Aladdin Hotel, like that didn't get any mention, I don't think.
And that was just a year or so after the big one.
Yeah.
But yeah, that didn't get any coverage really. it was kind of Jerry returning the favor,
Yeah.
but it didn't. No, nothing really happened between the two of them until Jerry showed up at the funeral of his son, and then that friendship rekindled, which is a horrible way to see that come about, but still happy that it did come about.
You've heard about the Paradise Road film that Bogdanovich wanted to make, correct? For what, Dean and Jerry?
I've heard about that, and in fact, in the early 80s, a friend of mine was Jerry's assistant, personal assistant, and he told me a story that Jerry tossed a script at him and said, have a messenger bring this back to Paramount. And he said, well, what is it? And it had Dean Martin's address on it. And he's like, well, what is this? It was a sequel to That's My Boy 20 years later, of where those two characters, Jack Jackson and the Dean Martin character, were later in their life, and how they hadn't lived up to the potential of being football heroes and whatnot. And it wasn't a comedy, it was a drama, but about the same two characters. And it had been sent to Dean, and he read it and checked it off. And the next one it was to go to was Jerry. So Dean had that script in the early 80s, delivered to Jerry. Jerry read it and he checked it off. And so my friend's like, well, are you going to do it? And he's like, of course not. He said, there's no way on earth that either one of us will do this, but it's an interesting idea. And to me, it's a fascinating idea, but no, wouldn't even consider it. But the fact that they both read the script is very interesting.
I do know that that idea had been floating around in the 60s, because he had wanted to remake it with his son Gary in Junior Jackson's spot, and then he would play the dad. So there's that version.
I never heard that at all. No, this was an actual Martin and Lewis film in the mid probably around 1983. And it was a drama. There was, some mild humor in it, but it was not a comedy.
Do you know who had written the script at all?
That's all I know. I don't even remember what the title of it was. It might have even said That's My Boy 2, just as a shorthand way of putting something on it, but that wasn't the official name of it.
Maybe it's the guy who was obsessed with all the That's My Boy collection. He had the whole That's My Boy memorabilia.
Maybe.
He just wanted that one.
My friend who my friend who had worked for Jerry is the one that told me about the That's My Boy collection, because it had that beautiful standee that's going to be on the back cover of the book that I own. And he wanted a lot of money for it, and I had to have that standee. So I paid it, and he shipped me his That's My Boy collection in this huge box. All kinds of weird stuff. Restaurant checks signed by bit players from That's My Boy, and lots of pictures of the woman who played the maid. And that's all he collected on was That's My Boy. And I bought his whole collection to get that standee.
How did he even find that?
Who knows? I've heard of people having an area of specialization, but that's a little ridiculous. But I was still happy to get the standee, because it's in my movie room right now. It's gorgeous.
I remember when that whole thing was listed on eBay, and I was like, wow, this is dedication.
Yeah, I think I paid $700 or $800, or it was something like that for the whole thing.
Well, I think that's pretty reasonable. I like the one, like a lot of the photo books I have of Jerry that have a lot of stuff. I've paid like $600 from. Unfortunately, his family's been selling his photo books online, which is weird.
Yeah.
But hey, at least there's been, my friend got some awesome Dean and Jerry photos from that, especially at the El Mirador Hotel. That's the one she got, the whole photo book. That was also later in a magazine. I'm not sure which magazine, but it was a family magazine. And for those of you who don't know, there was also the uncensored photos that appeared later on. So it was those photos. So I think those photos Jerry must have sent to his driver, Frank Branda, whose collection these nude photos showed up in of Dean and Jerry at the El Mirador Hotel. But it just still is very odd to me that this was in a family magazine with them even halfway dressed. You know, they're in the shower. What is this?
It's very bizarre.
Like also like seeing them in more adult magazines of the time, like I'm kind of like, maybe not shocked, but you know, I just find it unusual that they would be seen in such magazines when, you know, like the studios were trying to, this is family entertainment. So I don't know who would have done this marketing if like of putting them in a magazine with strippers. I don't know. It's like Tempo. I think it was Tempo magazine was one of them. View. I don't know. They're like really racy for the time, little miniature magazines. And so I don't know. You would think that they wouldn't want to be seen in such magazines if, you know, especially by the studios, but I don't know.
Hal Wallace tried to control them and failed miserably. And it wasn't the 30s and the 40s anymore. Hollywood was changing by then. And Hal Wallace, that's the Hollywood he came from. He worked at Warner Brothers. Humphrey Bogart, Cagney, all those guys reported to him, and he kept them controlled. But Martin and Lewis, they pretty much did what they wanted. They didn't really care about what people thought or what the repercussions might be. The fact that they even posed for those pictures in the shower, they just thought it was a joke, not realizing that 60 years later, they'd still be out there and kind of raise your eyebrows when you see them. I just thought, why would they allow these to be taken? Well, they didn't care. Obviously, they just didn't care.
Yeah. But like, well, especially with the caddy outtakes that you do mention in the book, the only people that cared were like those. I don't know which magazine it is, but you do show it in the book, I think. The one that's chastising them over the record, and then over Jerry's record of I Love Girls.
The caddy spots, and it's 3.5 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. Those were sold under the counter as a smutty record for people to play at parties. Hey, you think you've heard Martin and Lewis? Wait till you hear this, and it would be the hit of the party. Play it again, and it's a little shocking even to this day, although it's hilarious as well. But that's another thing. they knew the tape was rolling. They were trying to get laughs, and being dirty is a surefire way to crack people up. These were the capital people, the Hollywood people. They'd seen and heard everything, and they're laughing uproariously at this the language that they're using. So when it immediately was put out as a smut record, it sold hundreds of thousands, coast to coast. It was a huge thing. My friend Jeff Abraham sent me a picture of what the sleeve looked like, and it's like a plain brown wrapper. It's just not even identified, because it was almost illegal the way it was sold.
Oh yeah, I have one of those.
Cool.
Some of them usually have some other things on the other side, but like I've heard that there was like more to it, those outtakes. So I don't know. My friend said that he's heard more that wasn't on those release records. So I don't know. Maybe one day we'll see some addition to it.
I've never heard more than that 3.5 or 4 minutes. But I've heard it like 50 times. And yes, it's to some of it's transcribed in the book, but it's so easy to hear. It's on YouTube. You can just put in Martin and Lewis, the Caddy X-rated outtakes, and anyone can hear it.
And the I Love Girls outtake, I think I own the only one, because like a member of, so it was listed on eBay. It was listed on eBay for, I think it was $250 at the time. And I put in my bid. I think I hadn't won yet. The guy took it down because before its time. And I asked, I was like, why did you take this down? I had bid on it, and it just seemed weird that it just disappeared out of nowhere. I was wanting to buy it. And he told me that a member of the Lewis family organization had contacted him, telling him that he must not sell this. And I was like, what? And then he was like, you know what? I'm going to put it back up. It's ridiculous. I'm going to put it back up. So he put it back up. And then I'm not sure if he took it down again or something. Anyway, the other guy was trying to outbid me, the member of the Lewis organization or something.
Oh, wow.
And or like, I don't think it was on bidding level. I think it was just make an offer or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll make you this offer, but I want it. And I think I ended up paying like $550 or $500 for this one record. And like the guy was telling him like, nobody can have this record, or it must not be seen by the public. Like, what? All Jerry says is MFers or some other.
Well, I'd learned the term mother banger from that record. You mother banger.
Is that what he's saying?
That's what he's saying.
Okay. Because I was like, it's kind of like, like it's really kind of just noises. And I was like, was he trying to say MFer? Like, I don't know. And then he's, talking about piss, and
yes,
he's turning yellow, and yeah, he's mellow. And so
I'm glad you won it, because I got to hear it myself and enjoy it.
The only reason I knew about it though was from that magazine, and I was like, what is this additional part? Because they apparently knew about that record too, but they acted like it was part of the Caddy outtakes, because they didn't mention, hey, this is a different song. But I recognized it. I was like, that has to be I Love Girls, because but where is this? And then eventually, like, I think it was listed as I Love Girls outtake, and then I was like, that's it, I'm going to get it. And then there it was. But I can't imagine why the Lewis family organization wouldn't want him this out when it wasn't anything offensive. And
Well,
then,
it's
like, the
nothing
other,
like the caddy spots.
yeah, like what is it? Like, I'm pretty sure we've heard Jerry say the F word otherwise, and it's not even that, it's bangers or whatever. Apparently, and I don't know. That was just really weird, a really weird experience. So I'm glad he ended up selling it to me and not listening to the other people. But yeah, sometimes you have to, even if you're poor, you got.
Well, if they had gotten it, it would have been buried away forever. No one would have heard it.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why I those photo books, like I've heard, like these photo books have been, some of them, if they didn't sell, like I've heard that some family members have been trashing them, and I hope that's not true. Um, but because these are priceless photos of Jerry's career and Dean's career even, and you gotta save them. I'm glad there's fans that have been collecting these photos and doing whatever it takes. I don't know if you saw, there's the Italian book, Italian. I got in trouble by saying Italian the last time. Italian book that just came out, the Jerry Lewis in Persona. It had them at the Sands from 1956, and beautiful photos
Ooh.
of those, and some of them, the guy who was collecting the photos from me, like he shared some of those images with me as well, and I was like, wow, these are awesome Martin and Lewis Sands photos from 1956. And then there was I think some other ones that he had there that hadn't been seen before, and they had come from Jerry's personal photo books, so I think he bought them personally too, so that's good. It's nice to know that these photos are going into good hands and stuff.
I did get a couple of rare images from Morgan Christopher,
Yeah.
Which are in the book that have never been published. So there's a real a mixed bag of rare images in Marketing Mayhem that, as you say, even someone like yourself who has seen everything, there's quite a lot that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Paraphernalia of the era that's just been collecting dust for 60 years, and it's in the book.
Yeah, it's great that you've restored them, and some of the issues, even getting it to print with the cross hatching, that's been fixed. But unfortunately printers, I don't know why scanners do that with it's even happened on mine, and I'm like, I'm trying to restore this, and there's not much you can do with the exception of like a few little tricks. But we got it. You've got it as best as you can in this book, and they look great.
Definitely the first go round, that they looked pretty gray and muddy, and I was not happy. So I did research, and I bought a new scanner, and I rescanned every press book image that was created with dots for newspaper reproduction, and they look spectacular now. Rich, vivid blacks. I think I haven't seen a book yet because the first ones haven't printed yet, but we will soon, and I think they're going to look just spectacular.
Yeah, I'm already impressed with the PDF, seeing those images without the cross hatching, and I'm like, whoa, that's a transformation there. I'm glad you were able to fix
it was
because this is the whole thing about this book is imagery.
Yes.
and like and it's from top to bottom. It's got some of the best images ever seen in a Martin and Lewis book, or even a Jerry Lewis book. So that's something.
And that brings up a great point. I other than biography type books, there are two books that I consider essential, and I'm hoping mine will be like the third of these three books. The first one is the Jerry Lewis films, which Jim Nyber and Ted Okuda wrote, and I rave about both of these books in my book. This book is essential because it's film by film of every Jerry Lewis movie, and at the end of each chapter, they sat with Jerry and they interviewed him about every film, and it ends with a Jerry Lewis paragraph on each movie. Just fascinating. And then the other one came out just a few years ago from my same publisher, and it's Side by Side. So that's the films. This is the television shows and the radio shows. And Michael Haid gave me quite a few fantastic images. A few of them are in the book, but a few didn't make it into his book, and now they're in my book. So you've got movies, then you've got television and radio, and then you've got the way they were promoted and marketed in my book. The three books cover the Martin and Lewis experience.
A trilogy. And
yes.
I mean, hopefully one day, I don't know why I didn't think at that time when I helped submitted like some of the photos for Michael Haid's book. I did a lot of promotion, but I didn't do videos and interviews at that point on my channel. So maybe one of these days we'll get Michael back in here, and maybe you can come on and we can talk about his book as well, because that I consider that one like a Bible of information for the Colgate Comedy Hour in such detail, and their radio shows, like a lot of them have never been heard from the radio shows, and and they can't be accessed unless they're, if you go to I think the Paley Center for the Media and some other places.
Luckily, I have a huge collection of radio shows on CD, and I have pretty much all of the Martin and Lewis radio shows. So in preparation for the book, I listened to more than 100 episodes, so and I have them.
You have the ones that aren't online?
I do.
Can you share them with? I won't share them publicly.
I'll share them with you. Absolutely.
Okay. Yay.
And then even more interesting, I watched the 16 films in release sequence over a month. And it was fascinating and very rewarding to just see how they go from movie star novices, very unsure of themselves, a little awkward, to playing character roles that aren't really capturing who Martin and Lewis are, to getting to Sailor Beware, and all of a sudden, bam, classic film comedy. And from Sailor Beware on, they've nailed the formula, and they just do that over and over. And that's when they have movie star presence. They own the screen. Look at Dean Martin with Polly Bergen in At War with the Army. They're just awkward and uncomfortable. And then look at the same two in That's My Boy, exuding charisma. They own the screen. And it's just 2 years later, it's fascinating to see the transformation.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned like At War with the Army is awkward. The whole movie is awkward. I don't it's just like it doesn't flow right, and it's just like
it's tough to sit through that one.
And I can't take that it's the most available. It just doesn't represent them well.
Not at all. And people think it's a typical Martin and Lewis movie. It's actually the second movie they filmed. It just came out after My Friend Irma Goes West. So they never should have picked that property as the Martin and Lewis film. It was a stage play. They're playing characters. They're not playing Dean and Jerry roles, and it's just not very entertaining.
And like, I hope Jerry cringed at the line, like they have him saying like a concentration camp has got to be better than this.
Oh yes. And it's not like he said that line before they knew concentration camps. It's 1949. They already knew. So, horrible.
Like, who wrote this? Who wrote this line? That was like this, and that's the, I don't know. That might be top of the line and most horrible lines in any of his films.
I rank the films from best to worst, and the worst Martin and Lewis film, At War with the Army. Easy.
Yeah. Of course, there were ones I disagreed on, but I gave you everybody's gonna have different
Everyone has their own opinions, absolutely.
And you're pretty fair in your judgment of every film, I think. And so that's definitely great and what you want to see. Because some authors are, a little too judgmental, I find, and then I just was like, I'm not buying this book. I don't know. It was like, I think it was Enfant Terrible or however.
Oh, well, yeah.
Not like I read it or parts of it in the library, and I was like, oh my God, no, stop. This is just horrible. Like, you're picking apart every film. Like, why are you even...
Exactly. Why are you writing this book if you don't like the subject? What is a cash grab? So I make it clear in Marketing Mayhem, I'm a fan and a collector first, and I find good things in even the less than good projects. Like At War with the Army, Navy Gets the Gravy. I love that scene. I love that song. And when they depart from that play and they go do their show and they do the Bing Crosby and Going My Way sequence, that all of a sudden it's Martin and Lewis. Oh, look, Martin and Lewis are in the Martin and Lewis movie. So I point out the good things in a bad movie, but I'm not ripping into them. I'm not judging them. There are human flaws, as with all people, and I don't shy away from that. But it's not about that. It's about how they were marketed. I share my opinions, but I tried to be fair. I tried to make sure Dean got his due, and I think they both come across wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're pretty fair in all your things. So yes.
Thank you.
That, and then you mentioned That's My Boy was it's kind of an odd film because they just they're not themselves yet. And
well, that's exactly how I kind of say it in the book is That's My Boy. It's a great movie. It's just not a great Martin and Lewis movie. They're not playing Martin and Lewis roles. Dean was 34 and he's playing a high school student. It's just, he doesn't look like a high school student. He's a mid-30s man. But
is this Grease? I don't, maybe.
Exactly. I didn't buy it in that either.
And then now, like, people wonder, like, the expectations of like high schoolers and how they look. Like, they're little kids still, basically. They're not looking like full-on adults, and yet they keep putting adults as high schoolers.
Well, it's interesting when you read modern books that have hindsight and they're saying That's My Boy was such a departure for Martin and Lewis because they're playing these characters. It's like, it wasn't a departure. They hadn't figured out the formula yet. They had made 2 Irma movies and At War with the Army. They didn't nail it until the next movie after That's My Boy, and that's when the sameness kind of crept in, which that's not a bad thing. I love that formula. But if you want to see Martin and Lewis as the public loved them, then watch the Colgates. That's Martin and Lewis, the nightclub Martin and Lewis.
And I would like close to their films, like I would say Sailor Beware is probably like their funniest, like gag wise. I think just one funny gag after another. And I mean, some of their films have a little bit more plot to them, like the Stooge, I would say. That one, I would say maybe that's the one they're thinking is more like a departure in which they infused lots of comedy with lots of drama as well, and it was a nice mixture. Whereas That's My Boy, it's like there's not a lot of funny things in this movie. There's not much, like, I mean, in the Stooge, there's funny moments, and then That's My Boy, it's kind of just like as a drama, basically.
Well, That's My Boy is about a father and a son, not about a comedy team in the paratroopers or joining the circus.
Yeah, it's a totally different story. The focus is not on their relationship as every film after that was. And because My Friend Irma was just mostly Marie Wilson and Irma show. And I think My Friend Irma Goes West was kind of a mixture of a bunch of different things.
Well, in My Friend Irma Goes West, they realized Martin and Lewis really are the whole show, so we probably should focus more on them. So they have a lot more to do in that, and the plots actually revolves around them, where in the first film they're just the roommates that are staying there, the kind of shoehorned in. So, but My Friend Irma Goes West, it isn't as entertaining as the first one. I don't think. Martin and Lewis are separated for a lot of that movie.
Just like That's My Boy. It's like they don't meet for like 30 minutes or something, like, or almost like maybe 25 minutes. And it's like, I'm not sure why they had a problem in the Three-Ring Circus with them not meeting for like 30 pages or something. That's probably around the same amount as That's My Boy. So,
it's the same thing, except by that time they were looking for reasons to be cantankerous and to fight with Hal Wallace. So I'd love to read that first 30 pages of Three-Ring Circus that he ripped out and threw on the floor. What was, I mean, they must have been in the army or something. I don't know. I'd love to read that material.
Yeah, I wonder, I often wonder like what other projects that they turned down. I know they like were considered for like the Pajama Game or something, or it may have been just Dean, but like that would have been interesting to see them in those types of films, or just even the projects that they might have done together later on. Like, as you mentioned, I don't know, I think you mentioned this, like who was that lady, Dean and Tony Curtis do that, and that seems very much like a Martin and Lewis film, what could have been in a later 60s, early 60s era. And Boing Boing is very also Curtis. Also a Tony Curtis is very Martin and Lewis-esque. And Dean was originally offered the Tony Curtis role before Jerry was even attached to that, but he turned it down. So that would have been
that could have been an interesting Martin and Lewis reunion, more adults, more, full of sex of the time. But I kind of say this in the book. I can't imagine Martin and Lewis in the 1960s. They just they don't belong in that decade. They belong in the 50s. Now, do I wish they had never broken up and kept making movies into the 60s and what they might have turned into? Of course I do. But we still got the Errand Boy and the Bellboy and the Nutty Professor. I love those movies. I, I had seen every Jerry Lewis movie, but there were many Dean Martin movies I had never seen. And in preparation for the book, I got to see them. And Who Was That Lady is one of them. I've never seen that. I
Yes.
loved that movie. My wife watched the first few minutes and she's like, "Oh, this is dumb," and she left. But I stuck with it, and it went from dumb to fun to nutty to totally off the wall, screwy. I loved it. But my biggest surprise was a Western from 1971 called Something Big. I had never even heard of that movie. Doesn't even sound like it's a Western. Something Big. Do yourself a favor, seek that movie out. It's so funny. Dean is
Oh, really?
so good. It's a comedy Western.
Oh, okay.
It's he's got to get a gun, a certain kind of a Gatling gun, to pull off something big, the big robbery, so he can finally retire and not be a bandit anymore. But to get the gun, he's got to do this and steal that and do that. It ends up being this whole rigmarole and all these kind of nutty characters. Brian Keith is brilliant from Family Affair, brilliant in this movie. I just loved it. I can't wait to see it again. So Something Big, check it out.
Where did you get it? Like, it's on DVD?
I just bought it on DVD. It's like $7 or something, really cheap, on Amazon.
Yeah, a lot of his Westerns I haven't seen. I'm gonna there was one with him playing a villain of all things.
He plays a villain in several of them, sometimes kind of a comic villain, but in one of them, he is a nasty, really. Every once in a while, he takes a part seriously. Like the Mad Helm movies are just goofiness. They're not James Bond movies by any means. But every once in a while, like Airport, he tries, he shows up. He's not playing boozy Dean Martin, which that's who Mad Helm is.
Yeah.
So Something Big, he's playing the character. He's got a really good script. But I think it was Rough Night in Jericho. He is the nastiest killer, and it's even a kind of a violent finale. He's good. I mean, you really dislike him.
Yeah, I read that, and I was like, I had no idea that he would be played an evil villain. So now I have to see this.
See, Jerry basically plays the same character, the kid. Now, sometimes Three on a Couch, it's a little more adult, but he's still a goofball. That the public, that's what the public wanted from Jerry Lewis. Dean had much more freedom, and he was all over the place in the film genres that he decided to select.
And that's why you see people complaining about Boing Boing, and they're like, he's not himself. Like, he's playing more of an adult man. Like, that's not what they said, but he's more subdued or whatever. And
no, they want to see the Patsy over and over again, and so do I. But at least he tried different things, and Boing Boing's okay, but Three on a Couch is pretty good.
I mean, he tried the jazz singer, and people didn't accept that. So, and he tried that pretty early.
Yeah, that was 1959, I think, and I have it on DVD in color. It's just amazing to see, but it's hard to sit through. It's just not very entertaining.
I feel like he wasn't completely ready yet. There's parts of his acting that you feel like, yes, I think later you can be a great actor, if you put more into it. I mean, he had his dramatic scenes if he had more time in the film, I think, or the show, it was a show, that it could have gone somewhere with the character had he had more to do with. It wasn't the same as the other versions of the jazz singer. So I wouldn't it was more of an experimental thing for him, I think.
Yeah.
But
Plus, it was just a television thing. It wasn't a theatrical experience.
Yeah, as opposed to like you can tell like the shift already like in 5 years when he did the Ben Casey episode, and you can see that he improved. And later
if you
on,
look at him in King of Comedy,
yeah.
he owns every scene he's in, and it's effortless for him at that point. He even made fun of how all the critics raved about him, and he's like, that's easy. Comedy's hard. Being in King of Comedy with Scorsese, walk in the park.
Yeah, and even like the Wise Guy series, he's pretty good in that. And I think when he was a little bit older, he was okay with being himself in front of the camera without, a little.
Well, he had nothing left to prove at that point.
I think
in the late 50s and early 60s, he had a lot to prove. He had a chip on his shoulder, and he was trying too hard.
And I just wonder, like, obviously the day the clown cried would have been totally different. So he did try, but but from what I can see from that, I think that could have been, a great dramatic performance, but we don't know. We won't know.
Nope.
One day. But I think a lot of his fans would have had issues with that. So,
Well, if it had been directed in such a way that ending gave it the punch that he anticipated, it could have been startling and noteworthy, or it could have just been horrifically embarrassing.
I think it's for a certain audience, and it's definitely not a comedy, and a lot of his fans would have, maybe not a lot, but a good deal of his fans probably would have not accepted him or been turned off by this performance.
It doesn't sound like it was coming out very well.
Yeah, after all, like Boing, they have an issue with that. So like,
yeah,
the mad people. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's just for a limited amount of people. But it could have brought in other fans because some people like Jerry's role in the King of Comedy only.
That's true. Yeah,
as I lose my voice, but yeah. So they're like, I don't like him in his other roles, but I like him in the King of Comedy. So, could have brought in new fans for sure. Before we end the show, can we see the Stooge poster and the That's My Boy poster behind?
Well, I have an insert for That's My Boy over here.
Oh. And it has Jerry on Dean's shoulders.
Yep. And this is the same art that they use on the 3 sheet, and then they put a little kind of a lobby card image at the bottom.
Wow.
And then back here, let me unplug this mobile. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Here's the Stooge insert, which I was kind of blocking it. These are 14 by 36.
That's awesome.
Most of the inserts for the 16 films. And then this is the 1 sheet for That's My Boy, which hopefully you can see it.
Yeah. It's always amusing to me how they put, well, not on every poster, but some posters, lipstick on them.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? I don't know. Like Dean and Jerry's lips are just suddenly really red and plump. I don't know who they're trying to appeal to with that, but okay.
Well, it's not supposed to look like lipstick, except it does.
It does. Yeah. Just someone needs to shade it a little bit less red. Well, we've come to the end of our interview and fun time. Thanks to Rick. The book is coming out pretty soon, and it'll be pre-order, right?
Yes, within a week or so, it should be up for pre-order because they'll have the page count. That's what determines the price. So you'll be able to buy it on the Bear Manor media site, but of course it'll be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the places that books are sold. And it should be out by April 15th at the very latest, maybe a little ahead of that.
Okay, so if this comes, depending on when I edit it, it's probably going to be within a week. The pre-order link will be in there in the description. And then later on, if you're watching this in the future after it's already been out, the regular link will just replace it. All right. Well, thanks to Rick. I've had an awesome time, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
I'd love to. It didn't feel like we were promoting the book. It felt like two Jerry Lewis friends just having a conversation.
Yeah, and it didn't even feel like 2 hours. 2 hours flew by.
Oh yeah! Wow. Well, you'll edit out the dull parts.
Yeah. Well, there was no dull parts.
There weren't any.
There weren't any. I'll just edit me running around to the corner randomly to get my thing, but that's about it because
yeah, that's it.
We're awesome. All right. Thanks for being awesome, an awesome Jerry Lewis fan and Dean Martin fan, and for creating this book and taking a year of your life to make it. Thank you.
I had a blast. Thanks, Kaylee.
Bye.
You worked and made me a star, dear. In spite of it all, I love you.